Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Into the Unknown. Today's episode, we're diving into the story of the eyeball killer, Charles Albright. You know, he had different types of territories in Texas where he was at large, and all the killings and all the stories, upbringing. We're going to dive into all of that in this episode. So please like and subscribe and tune in. Without further ado, let's step into the unknown.
Friends used to talk about the things we used to do, but until you return, I will be faithful to you. I will be faithful.
Charles Albright was born in Amarillo, Texas on August 10, 1933, and shortly after his birth, he was put up for adoption. Charles was adopted at 3 months by Dale and Fred Albright during Charles' childhood. His adopted parents tried to make his childhood the best they could, but at times, his adopted mother would become cruel and abusive. As you can see, of course, a lot of abuse in his childhood, and his childhood kind of started off already a little, lost and stuff because he was adopted, of course, and then, he got abused by his adoptive mom and different things that was happening. You kind of see those tendencies in some of his killings in the future when he started to dive down a dark path, and we're going to dive more into his violent future. We're going to do that right now. Dale Albright would make Charles dress up in women's clothing and force him to play dolls. She also locked Charles in a dark room when he was less than 1 year old to punish him. She would also beat him at times and tie him down to the bed when he refused to nap as well. I don't know if you guys know, but of course, Charles Albright was adapted into many shows and many series you've probably seen before, but he had a love for taxidermy. So, hunting the animals, killing the animals, and then making them look as live-like as possible, and that kind of led to what he do in the future. We started using, of course, the X-Acto knives to exact people's eyes out and all the different crazy things he did, and we're going to dive more into the stuff he did in the next segment. Dale Albright was the one who introduced Charles to taxidermy, showing him how to kill small animals. She showed him how to pick apart the animals, knives to cut out the skulls, spoons to scoop the brains, and scalpels for cutting the eyeballs out. Charles put a lot of time in perfecting his taxidermy pieces, making them look live-like as possible, and each of his projects ended with the eyes being placed as the final touch. Charles loved browsing and searching for the perfect pair of eyes, wishing that he could collect them. Again, of course, a lot of his actions originated, from his childhood, of course, his love for taxidermy from his mom, to teaching him that, the adopted mother teaching him that about taxidermy, the skin of the animals, and also, he'd been in trouble a lot. He graduated kind of early, like at 15 or 16, he graduated, and he got into a lot of trouble at college. He got kicked out of one college for stealing and doing all types of things. He went to another college, he got kicked out of that one, but he thought that he deserved the degree, so he falsified some documents, and it eventually led to more and more trouble in his life. We're going to dive more into that in the next segment. After some of his crazy school adventures, Charles Albright would get married and have a daughter with his college girlfriend, who would become his wife later on. During a time in their marriage, Charles was caught for his falsified degrees, which led him to be placed on probation. Charles Albright and his wife got a divorce eventually, almost 10 years after they separated, and Charles Albright's life would go in an even worse downward spiral. Albright got arrested and spent 6 months in jail for stealing, and he would get arrested again later for sexually molesting a 14-year-old girl. He would only get probation for the crime after pleading guilty. Of course, he got hit with probation for sexually molesting a 14-year-old. He later said that he didn't do it. He said he was kind of like pressured to say that he did it, but based on all his actions we've seen now, he probably Probably did it like that. He had a lot of history of doing different things. But eventually, he got divorced and then he married a new wife. I felt that new wife was almost like kind of like an alibi for him, like a cover up, because it was able to allow him to go out there and do his evil deeds that he started to do. And we're going to dive into the victims of Charles Albright, and we're going to do that in the next segment right now. The Oddballs killer's first victim was a 33-year-old prostitute named Mary Lou Pratt. She was found dead in DeSoto city limits, just outside of South Dallas. The woman was found stripped of everything except her t-shirt and bra, which were pulled up over her breasts. Her eyes were shut and she had severe chest and facial bruises. It can be concluded that the murderer beat her before he killed Pratt. One of the local residents from the neighborhood where the incident occurred was so mortified by what he saw that he brought a flower bed sheet from his house to cover the corpse. When the Dallas police arrived on the scene, one of the officers immediately recognized Mary Pratt since she was a veteran prostitute who worked at the Star Motel in Oak Cliff. While the sex workers often called for help due to abusive clients, it was rare for one to be murdered, especially someone as well liked as Mary Pratt. Mary Pratt's file was handed over to one of Dallas' most talented investigators, John Westphalen. The murder was a dumped body case, one of the most complicated types to solve since the victim was killed in one location and dropped off in another. There was also no murder weapons, victims, or other forensic evidence. Westphalen and his partner Stan McNear went to the office of the Dallas County Medical Examiner to watch Mary Pratt's autopsy. During the autopsy, one of the pathologists noted the needle marks on Pratt's arm and the bullet hole in her head. But she let out a gasp once she opened Pratt's eyes. Both of them were missing. The eyes was moved with such surgical precision that there was no tissue and the upper and lower eyelids were left unobstructed. After the shocking situation at the examiner's office, Westphalen urgently contacted the FBI's Violent Crimes Apprehension Program. The unit stores all the nation's most gruesome murders on its database. However, the FBI agent reported that they had no records of anything like the murder of Mary Pratt. Susan Peterson, another young prostitute, was dumped on the same street Mary Pratt was, outside the Dallas city limits in DeSoto. Her breasts were unveiled, her eyes were shut the same way as Pratt's, only she was shot in the back of the head, the top of the head, and in her left breast. The Susan Peterson case was assigned to Larry Oliver, a detective who didn't know about Pratt's murder 2 months earlier. The case unfolded in the same way as the Pratt case. When Oliver visited the medical examiner, he discovered that both eyeballs were removed from the corpse. On March 19, 1991, another prostitute named Shirley Williams was found dead, this time from the Avalon Motel a few miles away from the Star Motel. Her body was found at 6:20 in the morning, half a block away from an elementary school in Oak Cliff. As the young students walked to school, they could see the naked corpse lying lifeless on the curb. Investigator Westphalen was in charge of uncovering the murder of Shirley Williams. When he arrived at the Williams murder site, he directed the medical examiner's field agent to see if the body's eyeballs were still intact. When they discovered that the body had no eyeballs, they realized they were dealing with the same killer. During the autopsy of Shirley Williams, the medical examiner found the broken tip of an X-Acto knife blade embedded in the right eye socket. It was clear that the eyeball killer was in a rush this time. She also had a broken nose, facial bruises, and was shot in the back of the head. However, law enforcement faced an issue with Williams' murder. Due to the publicity of the local killings, the eyeball killer changed his tactics this time. His previous two victims were white sex workers from the Star Motel, but Williams was a woman from a different motel in another city. There was no telling where he would strike again. Charles Albright was targeted as a suspect for the killings when a woman reported to the police that he and Mary Pratt were acquainted. Apparently, he was also known among the local prostitutes to have an infatuation with eyes. After several prostitutes came forward saying that Albright had assaulted them, police had reasonable suspicion and could obtain a warrant to search his home. Investigators found a Smith & Wesson .44 Magnum revolver, several X-Acto knives, and a red-stained condom in Albright's residence. They also discovered Nazi literature, books about serial killers, and several dolls with missing eyes. Unfortunately, the gun wasn't a match to the one used in the murders. However, they did find hair consistent with Shirley Williams on his blankets and in his vacuum. Based on this evidence, Charles Albright was placed under arrest. Albright was charged with all 3 of the eyeball killer murders and Rhonda Bowing's killing as well, an unsolved case from 1988. That concludes the story of Charles Albright, the eyeball killer. A lot of people have speculations. They said, what if he wasn't the killer? What if the killer changed his tactics up so he wouldn't chase down or hunt down, the eyeball killer? But serial killers, as you guys know, they don't change their tactics up. They always have their routine. If you see any cases of serial killers, they have a routine. They have the trophies and different things they do. And plus, all the evidence kind of lined up to him. He had vacuum hair of the girls who died, of course. Now, maybe he was one of the clients that was there with them, but then, he had, of course, his X-Acto knives, and they found different things, of course, in his house that kind of led them to doing, of course, books about serial killers. They kind of like had everything kind of in place, the taxidermy and everything else made it seem like that he was actually, of course, the criminal. He was the guy who did all the crimes, and we got arrested. Most of those crimes with the eyeball killings stopped happening, of course, as well. So we think that Charles Albright was the killer. Now, they had one person who was on there who was labeled one of the victims of Charles Albright. They kind of later like pulled that away. So they said that she wasn't the victim of Charles Albright. So there's only 3 victims that he had, 3 or 4 victims he had, of course, that was going on. Maybe it was more, but maybe that's the only ones we can kind of link to him. But let me know down below what you guys think. You think Charles Albright was actually the killer? I think 90% chance that he was actually the killer. Even though they never found the gun, of course, but they had everything else that led to it. But let me know down below your thoughts of the story of the eyeball killer, and let me know what you think about this, and I'll see you guys, of course, on the next episode of Into the Unknown. Peace out.